President, as many Americans know, the current budget is going to expire at the end of September, and if an agreement is not reached, the government will shut down, which is, frankly, not anything that anyone wants. The question that we now have to address is how we keep the government open and serve the needs of the American people. As Americans know, Republicans have a majority in the House and in the Senate, and they also control the White House. They run the government. Republicans have the responsibility, therefore, to keep the government open. My understanding is that there will be a vote tomorrow on a continuing resolution to fund the government until November 20th. In the House, a simple majority wins, and I would imagine that by a very slim vote, Republicans will have the votes they need in order to pass their resolution. In the Senate, however, the rules are different, historically different. In order to pass a continuing resolution, it will take a 60-vote majority to pass. That means that at a time when there are 53 members of the Republican caucus and 47 members of the Democratic caucus, it will require bipartisan support. That's what Senate rules are about. In other words, Republicans will need Democratic and/or independent votes, I am an independent, in order to keep the government open. Bottom line, Republicans will need to negotiate. That's how the Senate works, and that is how democracy works. Speaking for myself, and I believe many millions of Americans, here is some of what it will take to get my vote. Number one, Republican leadership. Don't take away health care from 15 million Americans by making the largest cut to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in history. Number two, Republican leadership. Don't increase health insurance premiums by 75% on average for over 20 million Americans who get their health care through the Affordable Care Act. Number three, Republican leadership. Do not undermine modern medicine and the health and well-being of our children by rejecting the scientific evidence regarding vaccines. Number four, Republican leadership. Do not allow our great country to be moved toward authoritarianism by putting federal troops on city streets without a request from a governor or a mayor. Do not have ICE agents snatch people off our streets without due process. Do not undermine the Constitution of the United States and the rule of law by allowing an administration to refuse to spend money appropriated by the Congress. Let me be more specific. Mr. President, as I think almost every American understands, our current health care system is dysfunctional, it is broken, and it is cruel. At a time when we spend almost twice as much per capita on health care as any other major country, over $14,000 per person, 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. 85 million Americans. The Republican continuing resolution in the House does nothing to prevent 15 million Americans from being thrown off the health care they currently have as a result of Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. In other words, instead of lowering the number of uninsured and underinsured, if we do not act, 15 million more Americans will be uninsured. We cannot allow that to happen. This is a life and death issue. Studies have shown that up to 50,000 Americans every year will die unnecessarily if we do not reverse these cuts. So we're talking about here, if we do not act, going from 85 million uninsured and underinsured to 100 million uninsured and underinsured. Those cuts must be rescinded. But, Mr. President, it is not just preventing 15 million Americans from losing their health insurance. Everybody in this country, every business person, every union worker knows that the cost of health care in this country today is astronomically high and unaffordable. I don't care what state you are in. People cannot afford health care today. And yet, if we do not act right now in this continuing resolution, the Affordable Care Act tax credits will expire and premiums will skyrocket by 75% on average for more than 20 million Americans. Let me repeat. Health care premiums for 20 million working class and middle class Americans will go up by 75% on average if we do not extend those tax credits in this coming legislation. And let me say, I wish very good luck to my colleagues, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, who want to go home to their constituents and explain why health care premiums are going up by 75% in order to pay for $1 trillion in tax breaks for the 1%. I do wish you the best of luck in trying to explain that one. I do not intend to. Further, Mr. President, let me be clear. Vaccines work. Not exactly a controversial statement. A statement supported by every major medical organization in the United States and around the world. Vaccines are safe, they are effective, and they have saved millions of lives in our country and tens of millions of lives worldwide. In fact, vaccines are one of the greatest public health achievements in modern history. At a time when the Secretary of Health and Human Services has dismantled the vaccine review process, narrowed access to life-saving COVID vaccines, fired leading public health experts, and filled scientific advisory boards with conspiracy theorists and ideologues, we must stand with the scientific and medical communities and rescind Secretary Kennedy's dangerous policies. This is not about politics. Doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. We are talking about protecting our children from polio, measles, whooping cough, and other preventable diseases. Mr. President, the American people, slowly but surely, are catching on. No matter what their political view may be, Democrat, Republican, Independent, they understand that our current economic system is rigged. They understand that the very richest people in this country are becoming much richer, while 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and millions of people are trying to survive on starvation wages. The American people understand that while billionaires are getting huge tax breaks, they are finding it harder and harder to afford health care, to pay the rent or their mortgages, to afford child care, to be able to send their kids to college, to pay for the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe, or to buy decent quality food for their kids. The American people understand, painfully and depressingly, that unless we change the way the economy functions, their kids will likely have a lower standard of living than they do. In the richest country in the history of the world, it is likely that the younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents, while almost all new income and wealth goes to the people on the top. Mr. President, today we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of the United States. Today we have one man, Mr. Musk, who owns more wealth, if you can believe it, than the bottom 52% of American households. One man, more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. And by the way, he is on his way, it appears, to become a trillionaire, even richer and richer. Today, the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%. Top 1%, more wealth than the bottom 93%. And the CEOs of major corporations now earn over 350 times what their average employees make. While the billionaire class becomes richer and richer, real inflation accounted for weekly wages are lower today than they were 52 years ago. Huge expansion of worker productivity, and yet the average worker in many cases is worse off than he or she was 52 years ago. Mr. President, enough is enough. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, it is insane to be giving $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. If President Trump and the Republican leadership want my vote, they will have to rescind that tax breaks for their oligarchic friends. Mr. President, our country today faces not only major economic crises. We are looking at extraordinarily threatening moment to our democratic form of government. Frankly, we now have a President of the United States who does not believe in our Constitution and the separation of powers, who does not believe in freedom of speech and the right to dissent, who is moving us every day toward an authoritarian form of government with more and more power into his own hands. Mr. President, too many Americans from my state of Vermont and every other state in this country have put their lives on the line and sometimes died in order to defend democracy and our way of life. The right of people to live without fear. The right of people to express their point of view, no matter what it may be. You disagree with me? That's great. That's called American democracy. The right of people to vote without intimidation. Mr. President, today, in an unprecedented way, we have federal troops in cities in America who have not been requested by a governor or a mayor. Today in America, we have people who are being snatched off the streets, taken right off the streets, or out of their workplaces by masked federal agents, thrown into vans and dispatched to detention centers without due process. Does anybody think that that is what America is supposed to be about? Somebody walking down the street, getting picked up by masked men, thrown into a van, and taken God knows where. Today we have a president sending some of these people to South Sudan, to Uganda, to El Salvador. We don't know where. People have no relationship to the country they're being sent to. Imagine me plucked off the street, sent to South Sudan, country in the middle of a civil war, virtually no government. Mr. President, that is not acceptable. That is not what our great country is supposed to be about. These undemocratic, unconstitutional policies must be rescinded. The movement toward authoritarianism in this country must be ended. Mr. President, in this very difficult moment in American history, let us stand with the American people and listen to their needs. Let us not throw 15 million working-class people off of the health care that they have so that 50,000 people a year die unnecessarily. We cannot allow that to happen. Let us not raise health care premiums by 75% for 20 million Americans. People can't afford health care today. What happens when your premiums go up by 75%? Let us not endanger the children of this country by undermining modern medicine and making it more difficult for people to get the vaccines they require. And Mr. President, at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, let us not give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. And lastly, as we observe growing authoritarianism every single day, as we see more and more disrespect for the great Constitution of our country, which has made us an example to the entire world, let us, Republican, Democrat, Independent, let us stand together and save American democracy. Mr. President, if the Republican leadership does those things, you've got my vote. Thank you.